Well, welcome everyone. This is an addendum to our normal fireside chat. This is where we're going to answer those questions that have been overlooked for a couple of months. We don't want to leave you out, and therefore we're going to have them all here in this one extra segment. So Tom, let's get started. The question is on AI control and personal information. In our current climate, would it not be wise to get the message out there about the danger of giving those at the top all of our personal information through the internet? Information is power. We should not be surrendering it to those at the top. With AI becoming more advanced, people may be sleepwalking into a world of AI control. Whilst none of us really know the true intentions of these big tech and big pharma entities, would we not be wise to be a bit cautious and aware? How big is your cyber footprint? Will humans all be chipped and connected to the 5G grid? Let's hope not, but it is a real possibility. Police drones are already in use in some countries, and some people are already being chipped voluntarily. Vladimir Putin is alleged to have said, "Who controls AI will be ruler of the world." What is the wise thing to do here, Tom?
Well, this is not really a concern of the My Big Toe model. It is a real concern, though. Yes, we are getting into a space now, a technological space where information is easy to process, easy to move around, cheap to store, and it's getting easier and easier to collect. So does that lend itself to misuse? Well, of course. If you have people who are low quality of consciousness and who are only focused on what they want, their needs, their power, their control, then they will use whatever tools they have to gain that power and to maintain that control. That's just the way we humans are. Now, if we had a world full of humans that were all very high quality of consciousness, there wouldn't be a problem. The real problem here isn't the technology, it's the quality of the consciousness. You see, the technology isn't the evil technology. We have quality of consciousness that's pervasive in the world that's very low. Or I should say that very low quality of consciousness is pervasive in the world. So that creates the problem. And the solution to the problem isn't necessarily more laws and constraints on information. The real solution to the problem is raising the quality of consciousness. Now, in the meantime, to protect ourselves, laws and constraints are good things. We have all sorts of laws and constraints that help us get along in this society and interact with each other in a way that is more profitable for everybody. We're not supposed to murder or steal or lie or cheat. And there's generally rules and customs and etiquette, so on, that keep us acting more pleasantly and more positively with each other. But we cannot legislate everything. So yes, be aware, know that it's there, know that if it's there, it will be used in the way that the people in power wish to use it. It's a tool that they can manipulate. On the other hand, do not be fearful. You see, often when we talk about things like this, there's a lot of fear goes with it. Oh, the people in power are going to use this and it's going to be horrible and we should be afraid. Well, if we are fearful, we will tend to make negative things happen. So don't be fearful, just be smart. Okay. That means that you should stay aware, stay plugged in, stay connected to see what is going on and how it might affect you. Okay. and you want to petition for laws or for constraints, well, do that. Be active. Don't be fearful. And don't really blame the technology. That's not the problem. We need to look at the real problem, which is quality of consciousness. And the only thing that we can directly do about that is raise our own quality of consciousness. We can't force anybody else to grow up. So all we can do is grow ourselves up. Meanwhile, keep your eyes open, stay alert, and be aware of the surroundings and the world around you and how it's affecting you. And that's true in all things, whether it's talking about electronic surveillance or data information or anything else. You should always stay aware of the world around you and be aware of what's going on, but never be fearful about it. That's counterproductive.
All right, Tom, following up with your response to conspiracy theories in a previous Fireside Chat, he says, I found it interesting that you put conspiracy theories down to fear in your recent Fireside Chat. Some people are not content to live in ignorance and cannot justify just burying their heads in the sand. A loss of trust and an aversion to injustice is what drives many conspiracy theories. It's not about trying to scare people. It's about lifting or letting the bad folks know that people are watching and their eyes are open. Nothing can be proven, as Dean Radin says. The only proof there is in mathematics and alcohol. However, we can collect and cross-reference evidence, just as historians do. Many conspiracy theories are evidence-based and open to the fact that they could not be incorrect. But it is important that we are vigilant to help avoid future injustices. Surely this is a good thing in keeping with lowering the entropy of the system. It is all very well saying that a system of global cooperation is a step forward, but does this not lead to the centralization of power? And who polices the centralized power and stops it becoming corrupt? Are we really grown up enough for that yet? I don't think so. The human race has much further to go. Did the world consent to 5G and Starlink, or was it the decision of billionaire elites? What effect might all these extra radio frequency have on our precious collective consciousness? Okay, that's enough thinking for me for one night. Until your next Fireside Chat, which I'm very much looking forward to. What would you tell us, Dylan?
Well, okay. I would not encourage anybody to stick their head in the sand. That, of course, is fearful. That's a very fearful thing to do. To be afraid to look, to want to go hide, to not pay attention. Generally, that's either laziness or that can also be fear. And I would agree with a lot of those things, but life is and people are the way they are. And people of low quality will always try to abuse and take advantage of everyone else. That's just the way it is. That's what having a low quality of consciousness means. That's what being fearful means, is that because you're afraid, because you have a lot of ego, it's all about you. What I want, how much money can I make? How much power do I have? It's all I. Very self-centered, very fearful, and that is not a good thing, okay? But people are like that. You should expect that most people that you run into are going to be like that. So how do you deal with that? Well, first of all, you have to, as we mentioned before, you have to stay aware and alert and always have your eyes open and your attention to see what's going on around you and be aware of it. Secondly, you then need to take actions that you can take personally to avoid things that you think might hurt you or your family. Okay, so that means you can join committees, you can start, um, you can start groups that are, what can we say, trying to spread education about other viewpoints other than the one that seems to be dominating. You can do all those things. Just don't do it with fear. If it becomes a fearful thing, if it becomes an us versus them kind of a thing, then it's not really part of the solution. You're being part of the problem. Once you get upset and annoyed and angry, well, that's also all low consciousness quality stuff. Getting angry, getting upset, okay, calling names. That isn't helpful. That doesn't fix the problem. It makes the problem worse. So I agree with all those things you're saying, that these things are issues that people need to stay aware of. They need to think about. They need to look at these and say, how does this affect me? And then they can take some action to, um, move things in a more profitable and a better direction. But don't do things when you say, now, okay, take action. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to get angry and I'm going to get upset and I'm going to wave my hands around in the air and I'm going to swear and I'm going to rant and I'm going to rave. And that isn't helpful. It's just not helpful. That's not what changes things. That's what keeps things the way they are. What changes things is for you to be a person of high quality. Change your own quality of consciousness. Talk to people about these issues, but talk to them not in a way that is meant to frighten them or upset them, but to educate. That means with an even tone. It's not, oh, don't you know this is going on and that, and the people who own, and have all the money, they're going to tear us all up. That's just fearful stuff. But talk about the facts. Talk about the radiation levels of 5G. Talk about what it's done to insects and birds. Talk about the preponderance of studies that are relating brain and sexual organ cancers, to people walking around with cell phones, and that's even the 3G and 4G. Talk about the facts. Don't talk about us versus them, good guys, bad guys. That's not helpful. Okay, now people will say, well, the only way to get people stirred up so that they will, petition and they will, make change is if you make them fearful, scare them. That's what we need to do. We need to go out there and say, if you let them get away with 5G, all the babies are going to die and this is going to happen and horrible things will happen. And if we go out and go fear, 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 that will not help. That's not going to help. What it'll do is make it worse. It doesn't, getting people aroused because they're fearful is not part of the solution. And we think it is. We think that's the answer. If we can get enough people frightened enough that they all show up on a street corner on the same day and holler and throw bricks through windows, then, something will be done. Oh, yes, something will be done. But what you will have done is harden the case, harden the resolve of the people on the other side.
Yeah.
And they will do things that you will never see. Oh, yes, they will pass you a bone or two to chew on and make you feel like, oh, you've done wonderful things. But in the bigger picture, that's a losing strategy. Education, understanding is a good strategy, but not with fear. Getting people mobilized by frightening them generally doesn't work out. It doesn't work out very well. It just creates more of the problem that's at the core, and that is low quality of consciousness. So if you think you're going to raise quality of consciousness by making a whole bunch of people angry and upset and frightened, you're not. You're going to lower the average quality of consciousness. You're going to start polarizing. You're going to start making conversations, intelligent, information-based conversations, harder and harder to have. Everybody's going to be screaming about their beliefs and nobody's really going to be paying attention to, what the real facts are. It just doesn't help to make to try to get things done by frightening people. Now, that's what others do. Advertisers try to get you to buy their products by scaring you and say, if you don't use my product, something horrible will happen. You do use my product, and you'll have more sex appeal, you'll get more money, everybody will like you. All you have to do is drink this beer and use these cosmetics and buy this kind of car, and you'll be just your credit will go way up, social credit. Well, of course, all that's nonsense. So the marketing people like to use fear to manipulate us. Politicians like to use fear to manipulate us. The religions like to use fear to manipulate us. And on it goes. Our legal system would like to use fear to manipulate us. Now, do you want to join that group? Oh, I want to use fear to manipulate good things. It doesn't work that way. If you use fear, you're not going to do any good things. You're going to look like it. You're going to be acting like it. And your ego will say, wow, I've done some really good things. I got all these people whipped up. That's good. It's not good. In the bigger picture, everybody loses. You're part of the problem, not part of the solution. So that's the thing. I feel what you're saying. I agree with most of the things you're saying. These are issues that we need to look at. It's not that these issues aren't there, and it's not that they're not important. They are important and they are there, but we need to deal with them as they come. We need to deal with them and do it positively, not fearfully. Okay, that way we're part of the solution, not part of the problem. So that's my point on this. Now, he talked about the idea that globalization is going to happen now. And is that a bad thing because that's more centralized government? Well, it doesn't have to be centralized. It doesn't have to be people globally telling others what to do. That's not the point. Culture is not centralized. We're talking about a global culture that values life, that values people, that values caring, that values empathy and compassion. That's a global culture, okay, that has those values. That's not centralized, force making people do things. That's a culture that encourages people to be kind to each other on a global scale. We're talking about a global culture. And wherever you have global interaction, you will develop a global culture. Can't help it. It's not like, well, let's not do globalization. Globalization just happens because people are interacting with each other on a global level. You see, it's not a thing to avoid or make happen. It just happens naturally out of the interaction of people on a given level. If people in IBM all interact with each other, then you'll end up with an IBM culture. If people in the United States, interact a lot with each other, you're going to end up with a United States culture that reflects those interactions. It'll have rules and it'll have ideas and attitudes that try to lubricate the social interaction to make things work better for everybody. Like criminal law. That's part of our culture, is that we have laws. And supposedly the laws apply to everyone. Well, of course, we know that's not true. They don't apply to everyone. But they should. And our laws and our culture is not perfect. And we should be working on making it more perfect. But it's not going to happen quickly. Have a long-term view. It's not that we're going to fix all these things next month or next year or the year after that. If we can raise the quality of consciousness, we will fix all of these things at once. They'll all fix. So whether you like it or not, or whether we intend for it or not, as long as there is global interaction, there will be a global culture develop. Now, that culture could develop into a fascist culture, and then you'd have a fascist global government that would tell everybody what to do and when to do it. Well, that would be a very bad thing. Or you could have a global culture that told everybody to care about everybody else and that we're all in this together. We're one family, one human family, and we need to work together and cooperate with each other. That would be a very good culture. But the culture is going to happen. It's not that you can avoid it by somehow not having any global interaction. In other words, everybody stay in your own country. We're not going to interact globally. Okay, everybody stay home, stay in your own country. That would end the potential for globalization. That's not helpful. We've outgrown that. Our communication devices have outgrown that. Our transportation devices have outgrown that. Okay, we've gone from the tribe to the village, to the city, to the nation state. And at every level that we've begun interacting at these higher levels, we create culture at those levels. And the culture represents us. So if we, with our low quality of consciousness, create a global culture that becomes abusive on a global level, like some of our commercial global interaction has been, well, that's us. That's the way we are. But you can't fix the problem by telling everybody to stay in their own country. That doesn't help, you see. And you can't fix the problem by trying to make laws that force people to be a particular way. You have to let people be who they are. And that has consequences. And then you have to deal with those consequences. And eventually, as people grow up, those consequences will change and we'll end up in a nicer place. That may take a century or two. We've been working on it now for several millennia. Maybe a couple of more centuries before we get there, but it's changing more quickly now. So patience, work on the long view, change your quality of consciousness, grow up, accept things the way they are, stay alert, stay plugged in, do what you can to help, do what you can to make this a more caring, loving place. That's the way you approach it. That's not sticking your head in the sand. That's a fearful thing. I'm saying don't be fearful. Keep your head up, stay focused on what's going on, do and act in ways that help other people grow up. And realize that creating fear in other people to get them on your side in the long term will be counterproductive. It won't work in the long term. You may win a battle or two that way, but in the long term, you'll always lose the war.
Thank you, Tom. I think you answered that question well. The next question is from Skeptic. On the LCS, that's Larger Consciousness System, granting special privileges. First, allow me to make life easier for Donna if she ever gets to read my question on the Fireside Chat. Well, we didn't, so that's why we're having this, and I'm reading it now. By clarifying that my screen name is pronounced Skeptic, only written in Cyrillic because I'm part Russian, and the English version was already taken. And no, I promise I have not meddled in your elections. Now on to my question. You've told us about how Bob Monroe was able to breach our PMR rule set, that's physical matter reality, and still have out-of-body experiences liberally, despite his constant smoking, poor diet, and other bad habits. You've also mentioned how you yourself were mentored as a child by your two non-PMR friends, among many other distinctions, and even shown who you would marry one day. In the spirit of further understanding, I'd like to ask, why does the LCS grant people, such as Bob and yourself, these special privileges? I mean, I get it that you guys were paying attention, so to speak, and thus worthy of the extra attention. Although I must say that in Bob's case, the situation was more thrust upon him than it was in yours. But that much special attention? What does a guy have to do to get noticed by the LCS like that? To paraphrase the late and great George Carlin, I love George Carlin, Sometimes I feel like the LCS is one big club and I ain't in it. Cheers.
Yeah. Well, gee, there's several things. You had a bunch of questions in there, but I'll try to answer one of the later ones first. And that is, what do you have to do, to get the system to work with you? Well, that is an easy question to answer. What you have to do is be serious about your conscious quality. You have to be serious about growing up. If that's something that you really want to do, not just go through the motions, not just act like you're grown up, but really grow up, get rid of your fear, get rid of your ego, get rid of those beliefs. If you really want to do that, the system will work with you. It will start working with you. And it will give you things you need to learn, but you have to learn. If you're just kind of sitting there and it gives you an opportunity and you miss it, well, it'll give you another opportunity. If you miss it, it'll give you another opportunity, and so on. But eventually it says, oh, you're not ready yet. I'm wasting my time handing you opportunities because you never grab any of them. You don't seem to grow up. You just stay the same. So then the system stops working with you. So it puts its attention where it can do the most good. And that's with people who are really trying to grow up. So that if you want the system to start working with you, then get serious about raising the quality of your consciousness. That's the only thing you have to do. Nothing else much matters. You just have to be serious. You don't have to be at any particular level. You don't have to be good at it yet. You don't have to be fearless or anything. You just have to want to grow up in a serious being level, fundamental way. Okay. That is how you get the system to pay attention to you. Now, as far as uh, Bob goes, yes, it just happened to him, but it didn't just happen to him in a sense that here's this guy and he just didn't have any particular point in life until one day, wham, he goes out of body, and then he goes out of body and he doesn't want to go out of body. He tries not to go out of body. It scares him, but no, he just keeps going anyway, until eventually he realizes, well, it hasn't killed him or made him insane yet, so he might as well play with it and explore it, and he does. Okay, well, that didn't just happen by dumb luck. It wasn't just that Bob just happened to be there that day when the system was looking for somebody to make go out of body. The system doesn't work like that. Bob has, over many lifetimes, progressed in lowering his entropy and increasing his quality of consciousness. He has done things and been parts of things in various lifetimes that kind of made him suitable for this role in this past life that he was in. Okay, so it's not just a random thing like a part of a falling star, happened to hit him in the head and made him into a guru. It doesn't work that way. He earned his way to where he was able to do the things he did, get around in the out of body, make sense of it. And he had earned that through many experience packets of growing up and of learning. And he got to a point where he could be helpful. He could actually start something going. He could change people's minds. And it wasn't just Bob Monroe. In around the same time Bob Monroe was writing his books, you have Seth Speaks being published by Jane Roberts. You have, and if you kind of go back at that time, you'll probably find a dozen things that were just happening like that going on. That's because in general, the system was producing people of change, people that would encourage change, people that would encourage open-minded thinking, that would offer different ideas about the nature of their reality and the nature of consciousness. And so this was kind of being seeded in our culture. Why? Because we were ready for it. But you needed some spokesman. When people are just ready, it doesn't mean they just get a download and then when they wake up the next morning, they're lower consciousness. It doesn't work like that. So you have to make choices. And by those choices, you grow up. So people who were who had made enough choices and were grown up enough to be, can we say, motivators at this time. Okay, they were nudged. You know, what was Jane Roberts doing? She was playing with a Ouija board. That's not exactly, you know, really, you know, high quality information that way, but she was playing with a Ouija board, and Seth popped in. And pretty soon Seth said, hey, you want to dispense with this silly Ouija board, and let's get a direct line. And Jane agreed with that. So on that went. So Jane was ready to serve that function of channeling Seth. Okay. Bob was ready to serve that function of showing millions of people from his books that there was, you know, another part to reality, not just the physical part, that reality was more than the physical. And he did and said and did enough experiments that he verified that to himself. And a lot of his readers read it, and they found his verification convincing. So he opened hundreds of thousands, if not millions of minds toward a larger reality, the possibility of a larger reality. So did Jane Roberts and Seth, and on and on. Those two are just two that, you know, pop out of my mind, but I suspect you'd find 10 or 12. And things have kept popping up like that. You know, Seth came and went, and somebody else kind of filled that role in, you know, in another way. And we have all kinds of those sorts of things going on now, more than we had then, because this growth thing seems to be gaining momentum. So there's more and more people who are given information, who are encouraged to get out there and speak and write books and talk, and people who have earned their way to be able to do that just from how they've grown over the past bunch of lifetimes. So that's how that happens. And for myself, I can say that the last at least 2, if not 3 incarnations of mine were essentially a training course for this one. And maybe this one will end up being a training course for another one. I don't know, but I can see that there's a, you know, a progression. Things I learned, things, you know, things I learned the hard way, things that worked and things that didn't, understanding I gained, quality that I gained over time, and they're all just headed toward what I'm doing in this lifetime. Like I say, who knows? Next lifetime, this may be just another piece of that same puzzle, or another, you know, another step in that same direction. I don't know about that, but I can see of the steps that I have made have been very pointedly directed toward what I'm doing now. So that's how these things happen. They don't just fall out of the air and it's a, you know, a random thing happens and suddenly it seems like the system is working with some people but ignoring others. They're working with people who can be worked with to help change attitudes and understandings of large numbers of people. The idea now, and has been over the last probably 6 decades or so, is to get the word out, spread it, so that more and more people, it's not just a, you know, a few people off in the margin someplace, because there's always been a few people off in the margin someplace who really understood the nature of reality. You know, even 2,500 years ago, there were a few people off in the margins that really understood the nature of reality. It's not that. Now the point is to get that information spread in such a way that millions of people get the idea of the nature of reality and why that's important. So some of us, like Bob and myself and thousands of others, have been nudged to help this process of getting this word out, getting these ideas out. You know, we're being nudged to help do that. And it's not, you know, it's not Bob and I. Like I say, there's thousands of people out there that fit in that. And some of the people will even disagree with each other. It doesn't matter. They're all helping create a more open-minded culture, a culture that can think bigger thoughts, a culture that's not so conformist, say as it was in the 50s, a culture that's more open to many things. So it's, there's thousands of people who are nudging others to see bigger pictures and to have a better understanding of why they're here. So I'm just one player out of thousands. And all you have to do is go on the internet and start Googling things, and you'll find out there's lots and lots of people who are helping do that. Even the people who are talking about aliens, they're helping people open their minds to a bigger picture beyond just the physical or just the earth, if you will. So even though aliens have nothing to do with spiritual development, it would seem, at least for many of the UFO buffs, but still, it helps people open their minds, get out of the rut, the approved way of thinking about everything. Thinking for themselves, outside of the box. The more people you have wandering around outside of the box, even if they're chasing aliens, the better it'll all be later on. It's getting out of the box is where we are now. That's the state we're in. We got a whole lot of people with a low quality of consciousness, and we need to blast them out of that rut that they're in. Get them thinking, get them moving mentally. Okay, so that's why these things happen. And all you have to do to get the attention of the LCS is be serious about your growth. And if you are, you'll get all the help you can use.
Thank you, Tom. And Skeptic, I hope that answered your question for you. Well, we'll move on to a question from George T. from the MBT Forum. Free will awareness units without experience. You often talk about the free will awareness unit as it logs into this data stream. At first, it doesn't have any context to put it in. That's so until it has enough information or enough experiences in this virtual reality. So my questions are, for instance, if we take a few-hour-old avatar and for the rest of its life, we deprive it of any sensory data, what will free will awareness do? How will it respond to this kind of situation? What kind of context will free will awareness unit put data it gets from the larger consciousness system in if it doesn't have any kind of experience in this virtual reality?
Well, that's an odd question. Okay, we take a newborn and we make them blind, deaf, can't feel anything, can't taste anything, can't smell anything. So we get rid of all 5 senses. And now you're asking me, if we get rid of all 5 senses, we can turn all 5 senses off. What does that free will awareness unit do? Okay, well, it obviously doesn't process sense data because there is no sense data. There'd probably be no sense in that because the whole point of having an avatar is to be interactive in this virtual reality. Excuse me. To be interactive in this virtual reality, and through that interaction make choices, and through those choices grow up. So you've just taken all that away. So the free will awareness unit can't do what it is that it's supposed to do here. It's here, there's no sense data, so it can't make choices. The only thing it could do would be to quit. In other words, that baby probably wouldn't thrive without any sense data. The free will awareness, the unit wouldn't really have any function. There would be no choices to make, so it would be a useless thing. It might as well just take that partition down and go find another avatar, one that works. That would be a completely defective avatar and probably would not survive. It would just, what is it? Failure to thrive. there wouldn't be any reason for it to thrive. So I suspect it would probably just naturally not survive. I can't imagine a person surviving into, you know, childhood and then teenage and then adult that never had any sense data. But it wouldn't be a workable platform for a free will awareness unit to work in, because there wouldn't be any choices with it. It could wander around in consciousness. Well, then it's right back in the, right back in the chat room where it was before. That's not what it's, that's not what the IUSCs are trying to do. They're trying to evolve. It's not like that'd be like a return trip to the chat room with no real good choices. So that's a very odd question, but
Okay.
I think it just wouldn't, it wouldn't go on. The thing would be self-terminating in the sense that it would have no purpose.
All right. Yes, of course. The whole purpose here is to learn to interact, and that purpose doesn't exist. So there would probably be some sort of way that it would not survive, as you say. Next question from MBT Forum, D'Andre, is on laziness. I have a question on how to determine whether or not laziness is actually being lazy. I've been paying attention to my fears for about 3 years now, and I have felt progress emotionally. And I have felt progress emotionally wise, that's hyphenated. But things like making a living and keeping my family happy has only improved in relatively small amounts. I want to see more progress in these areas. Should I put a bit more energy into such things, or should I preferably trust the LCS with the guidance of my life in the beneficial direction while I focus on lowering my entropy? Should I read that again?
No, I think I got that.
Okay.
Well, it depends. What makes one person's, might seem like they're being lazy, but they may not be. They may be just collecting data. They may be just in the process of processing data already collected, trying to make sense of it or grow from it. I guess laziness is when you don't do things that you need to be doing to grow, because you just don't feel like it. Maybe that's how we're going to define laziness here. I don't know, but I would say that if you feel that your relationships and your family and other things could be better, you should try to see why. What could you do to make them better? Okay, how could you react and how could you be in such ways that would make them all better? And if the only answer that comes back to you is, well, what I'm doing is just perfect, it's just them, they need to get better, well, then that definitely tells you that you have some growing yet to do, because the only person you can change is yourself. And that may be the case, that they need to change. And maybe in that case, maybe you're doing it the best you can, and you just have to accept them the way they are. I'd say the key idea here, it's not, we can't come up with one answer that fits all cases. It's a matter of the intent, not the matter of the action or what's going on. So one person's lazy may not be lazy at all for, with a different intent. So it's not the doing that makes one lazy or not lazy, it's the intention that does. So let's put it this way. If during the day you have no negative feelings, you never feel anxious or annoyed or upset or angry or unappreciated or any of those other, unhappy, any of those negative things. You just don't feel any negative things. You're feeling very positive about everything. You're happy. You're enjoying your life. And if that's the case, then you're probably doing really well. And you could just keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to change anything. Just keep doing it. Keep learning, keep observing, and keep being useful. Because you must be doing all of those things. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel that good. Okay, but if you feel these negative things, then you know that there are issues there that you need to resolve, that you have ego, that you have fear, that you have beliefs, and those things are causing this negativity in your life. They're causing you to feel unhappy, you know, all the negative stuff that goes with it. You feel that way. So then you'd have to find those fears and try to work on them and get rid of them to where you don't have any of those negative feelings. So I think that would be the thing to look at. Look at your feelings. Are they full of joy and peace and tranquility and satisfaction, or is it full of stress and struggle and putting up with things that you don't like putting up with, doing things that you don't like doing? All of that is negative. So if your life is primarily positive, keep on doing it. You're doing great. If your life is negative, then you've got things to learn and things to work on. Okay, and it's not about somebody else. It's not about somebody else. I wouldn't be negative, but somebody else makes me that way. That is not a valid excuse. Other people can be however other people are, and other people can be negative. But that doesn't mean that you have to be negative. You have the choice to how you react to things. So if you're reacting in a negative way, that's your responsibility. You can't blame that on other people. So that's the simple test. Is my life positive and full of joy and peace, tranquility, and satisfaction, or is it not? If it's not, then you need to get to work. Start being more proactive at finding your fears and getting rid of them.
All right, thank you, Tom. I hope that answered your question, Andre. Next question from the MBT forum from Fun IUOC on the LCS allowing proof of the non-physical. In Tom's last Fireside Chat, December 2019, you can see how old this question is. Tom explained why it would likely not be helpful if everybody knew the bigger picture from the start. Based on this, I'm curious if the LCS would allow a proof of the bigger picture. I recently read a study done by a major university hospital in the US that attempted to prove the validity of out-of-body viewing in near-death experiences. A card containing random number and some images was placed at a location that could only be viewed above the bed of cardiac patients. The idea was that if any of these patients viewed the room during an out-of-body experience, they would also likely see the card and report what they saw. Unfortunately, during the time period of the experiment, no near-death experiences were reported. Was this just a coincidence, or could the LCS be deliberately preventing the occurrence or recall of such experiences under these circumstances because it would provide proof of the non-physical? And if it was the case that the LCS actively prevents proof, then why would the LCS be expected to allow proof in the form of results from Tom's physics experiments?
Okay, well, we should follow Dean Radin's example and not really get too wound up with this word of proof. Okay, it's not about proof, it's about evidence. Dean Radin has a saying that proof is for mathematics and whiskey, and everybody else uses evidence. Science uses evidence. So I have read some examples of what he's talking about, where they put a 5-digit number or a letter or a picture on top of the light fixture inside the operating room. And it's not just near-death experiences, but where they give people anesthesia, because it's some percentage, I don't know, 5-10% of people given anesthesia will sometimes have out of bodies. They find themselves floating around in the room, and I think it's kind of more of a random thing, but they do that, and they put this thing up there, and either they tell patients about it or just assume that they will notice it. And it has worked. They have occasionally had that work where the patient comes back and says, aha, I saw your number, and they read the number off. Okay, so that has indeed actually been done. That evidence has been collected. It has happened. Um, and the system will allow that to happen. So I would say no in this case that he's referring to, where there were no NDEs or near-death experiences during the time that this experiment was going on. I'd say no, that wasn't a purposeful manipulation by the system. It wouldn't have done that. In fact, if there was any manipulation at all, it would have been the other way. The system would have bumped somebody out of body and then pointed the picture or the number out to them and say, "See this number? Remember it. And when you wake up, tell the doctor." You know, if anything, I would expect the system would have encouraged that evidence rather than discouraged it, because that evidence is personal. It's personal between the doctor or the doctors, the people that are there in the operating room, whoever it is running the experiment, the people who are there, and the patient. So that's not broadly affecting, the population. It's just a few people get affected by that. And then they may write it down and say, "Oh, this happened. And, my patient read the number to me and he was absolutely right." And they may publish that someplace, but only a few people read it. And most of those will say, somebody just made that up. So it's if it's firsthand, then it's really strong evidence. Like you're the researcher, or you're the person that saw it, or you're the doc that is involved in the research. Then it's very strong evidence for those people. But for everybody else, it's weak evidence, because people can say anything you want. Maybe the doctor's just having a little fun with those dumb people who believe in things like that. You never know what's going on. Or maybe the guy who writes this up wasn't a doctor at all, made the whole story up. So the evidence gets weaker and weaker as it moves out into the population. Therefore, it doesn't affect many people. It only strongly affects the people who are involved. And the system tends to support that, not discourage it. What the system will discourage is pushing something paranormal in the face of a large number of people. And in that case, if you got, every network that there was and all the independent reporters and everybody else all together in a room, and then levitated all of them to the ceiling so they could sign their names on the ceiling with a big magic marker, and then had them come back down again, and then it was all over. If they thought that maybe they just dreamt it or imagined it, or it was an idea put in their mind, they could always go in and look up at the ceiling and see their signature up there. And maybe the ceiling is 20 feet high, not a ceiling that you can reach even from a normal size ladder. Maybe it's kind of ceiling that you need like a bucket, a hydraulic bucket to get up there and get to it. Then that would be evidence. But even then, it would be evidence. See, if that was just done with those people, it would be evidence for the few. But if this was all documented by news media of all types from all countries, all had their cameras running, and we're all watching this whole thing, then it wouldn't work. The system would prohibit it and say, no, it's not a good idea. We don't want to shove this in the face of people who are not yet ready to deal with it positively. They'll only deal with it negatively. It will create fear. It will create a lust for power, for control. You see? So in that case, then the system doesn't want to do things that raise entropy en masse, that raise entropy, with millions of people. That would be a bad thing to do. So in any case, that's called the psi uncertainty principle, and you can read about it in the books, and the books are free on Google Books if you want to look there. Anyhow, that's how that works. The system supports evidence, but mostly it supports it in small groups. Strong evidence in small groups, not in large groups. in small groups of people who have the capacity and are ready to learn from it. See, if you have somebody that actually puts the paper up on top of the light fixture, it means that their mind is open enough at least to try the experiment. Well, that's somebody who's ready to see the result. And the people who would never do something that stupid because it's obviously impossible, then they would never put the piece of paper on top of the light fixture. And they're probably not ready. If the patient actually said something, they would think, aha, somebody got to this patient and told them to say this after they woke up. You know, it's rigged. They would come up with beliefs that would deny what it is that happened.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks for your question on IUOC. All right, Tom, the next question is from Chickster. On checking on Jesus in the LCS database. Now, when we say database here, we mean the past actualized database where information can be tapped into. Is it possible to tap the past actualized database and obtain data from first century Palestine, specifically the events surrounding Jesus of Nazareth? I think it would be very profitable for a person whose growth is being stifled due to fears generated from beliefs in religious dogma. Do you know of anyone ever doing this?
I don't know of people who are doing that. I'm sure thousands of people have done that. I don't particularly know them, but the data is available in the database. So you can look at the data in the database like you could look at any other data in the database. Now, there are a few, once you get somebody well known, somebody that carries a lot of emotional content for people, such as Jesus, then there's a few other things you have to consider. One, the people looking, if they're going to get accurate data, they need to have no expectations, no beliefs. Otherwise, their expectations and their beliefs will color the data that they get. So if you go into it with a belief, you'll probably end up with data that'll corroborate whatever your belief is, because only things that corroborate your belief will be acceptable and everything else will be thrown out as an error. So it depends. Once you have somebody that with a high profile like Jesus, then you're going to have people who already have strong beliefs, who already have strong expectations of what the answers are going to be like. And it's going to be very difficult for them to actually get accurate data because of their own expectations and their beliefs. So they will get some sort of data, but it'll probably be the data that they want, the data that they would like to hear. Okay, so that's one thing. To get data accurately out of the database, you have to be detached from the answer. You have to have no ego in the asking of the question. If you've got an ulterior motivation, oh, I want this data so I can show it to my mother so she will do this or do that, then you probably won't get good data. It's only when you're detached from the answer, where you don't, you have no expectations and there's nothing particularly that you want to do with it. It's just data for your own growth, not data to share, just data for yourself to know. Well, now you'll probably have a higher probability of getting good information as long as you don't have beliefs and expectations. But if you're going to take that data and write a book about it, and you're going to take that data and share it, and you're going to use that data to win an argument, then it probably won't work. That's working out of your intellect, and you come to it already with intentions built in that are not just open. Okay, so that probably won't work very well. So it's a lot easier to do this for John Smith, who lived in the 1500s, where nobody really knows him. He was just a farmer that lives somewhere out in the country. You see, that would be easier because there's no expectations about who John Smith was, or some other person that was kind of a random person. You could get more accurate data there because you didn't have any input. It's easy to be detached about that. But when you get a figure like Jesus, then most people will have biases already before they start that will get in the way. Jesus was as they were taught, or he was the opposite of that, or he didn't exist, or he did exist. And a lot of people will come with all these beliefs and biases in their mind, and that will make it very difficult for them to get any useful information at all. So that's the problem. Now, the other thing is that if the system sees that a whole lot of people would use this information just to go start arguments. Oh, I was in a database the other day and I saw that Jesus always wore a yellow feather in his hat, or something. But then you had an argument with somebody else who said Jesus didn't wear hats. Then, the system may not play with you there. It may just give you goofy information, or it may just give you any information at all, because that's not a low entropy process. It's an egoic process. You want to win an argument. You want to show other people what your truth is, and you're going to use this information as evidence. So that's just ego, wanting to play a game, wanting to be smarter than the other person, wanting to have more evidence on their side. And that also would get in the way. So if it's just personal and you don't have any attachments, sure, anybody can get that information. If you want to write a book, or impress people or win an argument, not so much. You already come preloaded with junk that will get in the way of good information.
All right, thank you, Tom. Next question is from 7055 on sustainable resource-based economy. What are your views on the Venus Project and a future sustainable resource-based economy? Does it seem probable in the next 40 years, or will we continue under a monetary system managing and adapting to things like climate change, etc.? Does a monetary system make for a better entropy lowering experience, as it's more of a challenge, shows us who we really are under the harshest conditions? I feel like younger people mostly are more conscious, educated, and aware of aware of their choices and surroundings than ever before, but that it's not possible to sustain a healthy planet and a healthy economy at the same time. I do wonder where we will be in 20 years, even if we continue to all live as we do. Recycling, cleaning the oceans, alternatives to plastic production, zero waste living, consuming less, clean energy, etc., all help, but can the Earth sustain current human consumption levels for the next 50 years without dramatic Earth and weather changes? More and more people are being born every day with an ever-aging population and overproduction of products and pollution fueled by a monetary system. I feel the only way to live sustainable under a monetary system is if businesses and profits are made from eco products and energy, making money through clean energy, healthy products, electric cars, etc. But can the Earth grow stuff fast and sustainable enough, even at that? It's a loaded question, I know, but what seems most probable for the future?
Okay, well, it was a difficult question right up until the very last. What seems most probable for the future? And then it's an easy question. Okay. What's hard is trying to say, well, when is that future going to happen? Is that 10 years or 20 years or 50 years or 100 years or 1,000 years ahead? That's a much harder thing to do. But just saying what will happen, that's easy. And I can say that with confidence because we are evolving toward lower entropy. It's the nature of our system. We are evolving toward love and caring. Evolution is slow, a very slow process. Our evolution, I'm talking about the evolution of consciousness. Our evolution has been proceeding for about 200,000 years, and you see where we are now. And we still obviously have a long way to go, but it is speeding up. The thing is about evolution is, though it is slow, it is relentless. It will get there. Even if it goes backwards for a few steps, it will just keep chugging back toward kinder, gentler, more supportive, more caring for everybody. That's where it's going now. So the answer to that in the future, yes, absolutely, we will get there. Our economy and our business and all of that will be all sustainable. It will all be non-abusive. It will all be in support of a peaceful, caring, highly individual society. There will be maximum opportunity in this society. People will have more choices and more abilities to do most anything they want to do in this society when we reach that point of a caring society, right? A low entropy society, a high quality of consciousness society. When we get there, it will be all of those things plus more individuality, more choice. And you don't get stuck in ruts. You want to change careers 3 or 4 times? Not a problem. You can be a technician for 10 years and then you can be a poet for the next 10, as long as you learn how to be a good technician and as long as you're able to be a good poet. If you have the abilities to do those things, then you can do pretty much what you want as you want to. The system will support it. So it's a very lovely place. And the economy will support that. So yes, absolutely, we will get there because evolution is relentless. How long will it take us? That's a much harder question. 40 years? Maybe we'll just start to work out the kinks in 40 years. We may be heading there. We may begin the journey in earnest in 40 years. Right now, we're not even beginning the journey. Right now, having that kind of a future is only a journey for a small minority of the people on the planet. But I suspect in 40 years that number maybe will be a much bigger minority or a majority idea. That doesn't mean we'll have the solutions or we'll have it all figured out yet. It just means that there will be more people who see that as a necessary end, that we have to go there. Right now, most people don't even think about it. They just do what they do, and they're caught up in a consumer culture that doesn't care a whole lot about long-term sustainability. It's a very self-centered attitude. But we are who we are. The culture we have, with the fact and the monetary system that we have and the commerce that we have, represents us. That's who we are and what we are. And the only way to improve that is to improve the quality of our consciousness. And the only way to do that is to improve your own quality of consciousness. So again, we get back to how do you save the world? By improving your own quality of consciousness. That, in the end, will save the world more surely than anything else that you can do. Secondly, try to educate other people about the issues, but educate, not frighten, not make fearful, not manipulate others to agree with you, but to educate others to understand the issues. So those are things that you can do. But until we grow up, what we have is going to reflect us, going to reflect our quality. So you can make all kinds of laws, you can demand, you can do all kinds of things like that, but it won't work in the long term unless we, the people, change our quality. Everything else is a symptom. The problem is the quality of consciousness of our culture.